Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Ephesians. Today we're looking at Ephesians chapter 5, verses 3 through 7. Now, in yesterday's session, we saw that Paul told the Ephesian believers, walk in the way of love. As Christ has loved you, love one another. But now as he continues that thought, he wants to remind them, when you walk in the way of love, there are some things that can no longer be a part of your life. There were some things that were a part of your life before you came to know Christ. It's the way you lived back then. Those things can never be a part of your life now, because now you are walking in the love of Jesus. He specifically mentions 3 things that can no longer be a part of their life. Notice what he says, chapter 5, verses 3 through 7. But among you, there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity, or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, or foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For you can be sure that no immoral, or impure, or greedy person, for such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. Notice he mentions 3 things: immorality, impurity, and greed. Why does he mention these 3? Because these are the most common sins of this period of time. In the New Testament era, in the Roman world of that day, these sins were just commonplace. They were just everyday occurrences. Immorality was expected of people. They didn't even consider it wrong. Impurity of life, that contamination of life that comes from immorality, that was just commonplace. Everyone sort of expected it. And greed, the desire for more and more of the things of this world. These were the common sins of this era in human history. But now Paul says you are in Christ, and you have been redeemed from that way of life, and you've left it behind. So even though it's common in your society, it must not be among you. You must be a different kind of people, for you are God's holy people. And so immorality and impurity and greed cannot be a part of your life. You are a different kind of people. You are people of heaven, and you are people of holiness. And so these things must not be a part of your life. You say, well, why do they even need to be reminded of that? Well, it's because these sins were so common. And in New Testament times, in the Roman world of that day, everyone considered this just normal behavior. And so there's a constant temptation just to fit in with everybody else, to be like everybody else in the society, to just get along and do what everyone else does. I mean, everyone else does it. Why not the Christians? In other words, there's that temptation to conform to the standards of the world rather than the values of heaven. Paul says, don't let it happen. These things are not part of God's people. These 3 things I mentioned, although they're common in your society, immorality, impurity, greed, they are not to be among you, for you are God's people, redeemed from these things. Notice Paul even says that when you have these things in your life, that is a form of idolatry. That is a form of idolatry, worshiping something other than God. And you must not fall into idolatry. So Paul simply reminds them, you've been redeemed from that old way of life. So live in the new way of life, which is a life of holiness. You know, the church faces the same kind of temptations today. We're tempted to conform to the world, to adopt the world's values and standards, even if they are contrary to those of heaven. We must not do such a thing. These kind of things, immorality, impurity, greed, they must not be among the people of God. Yeah, we used to live that way before we knew Christ, but now we've been redeemed. So Paul says, don't let these things back into your life. Live as God's holy people. Hope you join us tomorrow for our next session in our 5-minute Bible study of the book of Ephesians.